Hey guys, how you going? I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to week 2 of the 30-day health kickstart. In today's video, we're going to be talking about all things consistency. Why is it so important? Why is it so difficult? And also, how can you remain consistent throughout your health and fitness journey? Okay, so let's start off with why it's so important. Now, anything that we choose to do consistently is going to yield results, whether that be positive or negative. For example, if you do small amounts of cleaning around your house every single day, you're never going to really get into a position where your house is a complete mess and it's going to take you hours and hours to clean it. If you have a goal to read a book, you could choose to sit down and read that all in one go, although that could be quite hard going and the likelihood of maybe not finishing it would be quite high. Whereas if you chose to read just 1 or 2 pages or maybe 10 pages a day, you could consistently add that habit into your day and over time you would finish that book. We see the same thing in health and fitness. If you choose to go for a walk every single day, over time you will notice an increase in your cardiovascular fitness, whereas on the flip side, if you chose to be sedentary every single day, you'd see a decline in your cardiovascular fitness. Finally, if you consistently overate more than your maintenance calories, you will gain weight or gain fat over time, whereas if you consistently ate less, you will lose fat over time. So whether it be a positive or a negative, our consistent habits and actions compound over time to yield results. So when it comes to health and fitness, consistency is going to be the #1 factor that you need to take into consideration. Whatever your goal is, consistency is key. And that doesn't mean you need to go in 100 miles an hour to try and remain consistent. In fact, it means very much the opposite. So that leads on quite nicely as to why it's so hard to remain consistent a lot of the time. Consistency is hard because of the classic short-term, quick fix mentality. It really does take trust in the process, an understanding of what's going on, and a long-term view to remain consistent. Another reason that consistency can be so hard is that we often rely purely on motivation to remain consistent, especially if we go in too hard too soon and try and take on too many new habits. Again, this is just a symptom of a short-term mindset, and as you guys know, we're really focusing on long-term health and having a long-term view instead of thinking about just the short-term and just what's happening now. Trying to remain consistent over a long time relies on making small but noticeable changes throughout your day, and sometimes when we're not seeing results immediately, we kind of wonder, why are we doing this? Is it really worth it? And that's when not having trust in the process or not understanding what's going on can become quite a problem. And that kind of leads on to the last reason why consistency can be just so difficult. And that is because it relies on making consistent and intentional changes every single day, regardless of your motivation levels, regardless of your mood or what's been going on in your life. Intention just isn't enough without action. So you're kind of having to do both of these things, and again, not seeing necessarily results or progress in the short term. So basically, you're committing to something that you know will be beneficial in the future, yet you're not seeing results straight away. And this can be a really daunting but also tiresome concept. Additionally, even though we know that fluctuations are normal, no progress is linear, it can be really hard to stay consistent in changes that you've made if you're not seeing the results that you expect. So even though we know that that's going to be expected, it can be really difficult to have that drive to go forward and continue doing what you're doing consistently, knowing that it's for the long term and you just have to trust that it's the right thing to do. Okay, so we know that consistency is important and we know why it's also really hard to remain consistent, but let's talk about how you can actually remain consistent and make it as easy as possible to get towards your goals in a nice, healthy way. So the first thing we're going to talk about is your motivation. Now, I always say you can't rely on motivation. I get messages all the time saying, how did you stay motivated? Or how are you motivated to exercise when you don't feel like it or when you're tired or whatever it is? And the truth is, no one is motivated all of the time. We're always going to have days where we feel good and we're always going to have days where we feel bad. The key is to get to a place where you're not relying on motivation. So when we started this 30-day health kickstart last week, we talked about goals and expectations. And the key thing here is to be able to reflect back and have that strong reason as to why you want what you want to keep driving you forward. It is much easier to form consistent new habits that are going to help you towards your goals if you have a good enough reason as to why you want to get there. So let's take an example. Let's say your goal is to be able to walk up a flight of stairs without being out of breath. So you've decided to start reaching that goal every single day. You're going to choose to take the stairs instead of the escalator on your way to work. Now, doing this alone over time will be enough to eventually increase your overall fitness so that you can walk up that flight of stairs without being out of breath. But it does take consistency. So you need to be doing that most of the time rather than taking the escalator. Now let's say there's a day where you're really tired, you're running late, you just decide you're going to take the escalator instead. Your mindset might be, it's not really that big a deal, I'll just take the escalator, it won't have that much of an impact and we can get on with our day. Whereas, if your goal was the same goal, that you wanted to be able to walk up a flight of stairs without being out of breath, but the reason was because you'd been told by your doctor that you were at risk of type 2 diabetes, or you were on the verge of having type 2 diabetes, or maybe you knew someone who was really affected by the fact they had poor cardiovascular fitness, then you would probably be more driven to actually make the choice and go, no, I'm sticking with this consistency and I'm going to choose to take the stairs because that is my driver. Whereas if you don't have that really strong reason why you want something, it can be easier just to make the choice the other way. So while motivation is not going to be there to rely upon all the time, the key to staying consistent and as motivated as possible towards your goals is really having a strong reason as to why you want to achieve those goals and why everything that you're doing consistently is going to get you there. That way you can tap into these things and drive yourself forward, even on the days that you just don't want to do it. Again, remember that teeth brushing scenario. We don't want to have teeth that are rotting, or we don't want to have to go to the dentist and pay loads of money to get fillings. So we brush our teeth every single day. We don't look forward to it, we don't necessarily want to do it, but it's just something that you actually do without thinking. Okay, so the next thing we want to think about in terms of making consistency as easy as possible is the compound effect. How building up a small habit and then adding on to that each time that you master it is going to make it easier overall, rather than going in too hard too soon. The compound effect is extremely powerful, and so instead of having the mentality where you need to go in all guns blazing and everything needs to be 100% straight away, start by just taking one small step and remaining consistent in that, and then add on to it once you feel like you've mastered it. Not only is this going to benefit you mentally because you feel like you've achieved something and you don't have such a fear of failure, which is such a huge thing when it comes to health and fitness, but also every single change that you make is going to be getting you closer towards where you want to be. This leads on nicely to keep it simple, stupid. How many times have you been told this? I remember when I was in school, most of my teachers told us this: keep it simple. We have a huge tendency as humans to want to overcomplicate everything, and it's just not necessary. I totally get it because I have been there. I spent years feeling overwhelmed by how complicated health and fitness was, how complicated exercise and nutrition was, until I really understood by actually doing it how simple it can actually be. When we overcomplicate things, we get totally overwhelmed, and it's just so easy to step back and go, this is not for me, I can't do this. Whereas if you keep things really, really simple, it's so much easier to put those into your day and do that consistently for a long period of time, because it doesn't feel like you're changing a lot. It doesn't feel like you're overwhelmed with information. As an example, instead of saying, I'm going to train HIIT 4 times a week and I'm going to do a 10-kilometer run once a week, and then I'm going to do a flexibility and mobility class once a week as well. Instead of saying that when you're coming from maybe doing no exercise, just saying simply, I'm going to move my body for 30 minutes a day. Doesn't matter what that is. It could be a walk, it could be walking up and down stairs, it could be doing a yoga session, it could be doing some stretching. All I'm gonna do is simply exercise or move my body for 30 minutes a day, whatever I feel like that day. Looking at those two options, you're much more likely to stay consistent over a long time if you chose the option that has just a little bit more breathing space. When we set ourselves too many rules and regulations, it can be really hard to remain consistent over the long term. Usually it takes a week or two and we're really on it and we're super motivated, and it just takes one thing to throw us off. So just have the ability to keep it simple. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. You can always add more in the future. Another really good way of staying consistent is tracking your progress. And again, we spoke about this last week in Monday's video, but tracking your progress is huge for consistency and motivation as well. Like I said, consistency can be really tricky because we're making changes every single day, not necessarily huge changes, but noticeable changes. And over time, these will compound and build, but it takes a while to see the results. So if you can track your progress, you can then refer back to actual number and data to see how your progress is going, rather than just relying on sheer willpower. And that's why tracking your progress in so many different areas is going to be beneficial, because progress is not just about how much you weigh or the way you look. It can be about how you feel, how you hold yourself, your social life, your mental health. Obviously, it can be how your body feels, how it moves, how you've progressed in certain exercises. The list goes on and on. So having a really good broad spectrum of different ways of tracking your progress is going to be beneficial, so you can draw back on that information when you're feeling like dropping off and your consistency is just not working, and you can see that it is actually making a difference. And finally, the last one I want to talk about is just allowing yourself some breathing space, allowing yourself some wiggle room, and again, loosening those expectations of yourself. The really great thing about having a long-term mindset and thinking about lifelong health is that you don't have to be 100% on it and consistent every single day. There is plenty of room for moving either side of whatever your goals and habits are. Often, if we have these expectations or we have these goals and habits that we're trying to implement into our lives, if we don't hit them, we berate ourselves, we feel like we've failed, and most of the time, after a couple of days, we'll just give up. Take again our example of the exercise, trying to do a regimented exercise routine when you're coming from nothing, or just simply saying, I'm going to move my body for 30 minutes each day. This option is going to give you much more breathing space and allow for just living around it as well. You know, there's going to be days where you don't feel like going and doing a HIIT session, or you don't feel like going for a run or doing some stair climbs. There might be just days where you just want to stretch. And if you have this option, it's quite hard to stay consistent when you have those days where you're just absolutely drained and you really don't feel like it. Maybe you've had a long day at work and it's just not your thing. So you choose not to do your session and then you feel like you failed. Or this option where you just say, okay, well, I'm just gonna go for a walk for 30 minutes. Or I'm gonna go for a 10-minute walk in the morning and a 20-minute walk in the evening and put a podcast on. This one's gonna allow for much more consistency, and it's gonna take a lot of stress off your plate as well. It's the same thing when we look at calories and weight loss or weight gain. If you have a certain amount of calories that you want to eat per day to help you get towards your goal, if you're looking short term, then yes, hitting that every single day is going to be important. However, if you're thinking years, lifelong in the future, you can do what you want. If you have a day where you eat much more, it's totally fine, because you can just draw back a little bit on the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks, and it will equal itself out. And it just takes so much pressure off your shoulders. When it comes to the big picture, consistency looks very, very different than when you just look at a very short-term time period. It becomes much more about compounding those small habits over time rather than focusing on faults along the way. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed that video and that it's helped you understand consistency a little bit better. I honestly believe that consistency is the number one thing. Things do not need to be perfect. You do not need to have the perfect nutrition plan. You do not need to have the perfect exercise routine. You do not need to live the perfect life if what you do is consistent in working towards what your goals are. So take the pressure off yourself, take the weight off your shoulders, take a nice deep breath, and remember that it's just about making small, manageable changes and just maintaining those. And once you've mastered them, maybe building on another one. It's just about doing the teeth brushing routine. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and I hope it's helped you in some way. We have a new week and therefore a new competition. Every week I'm giving away 3 copies of my ebook, so throughout the week, every single video is a new opportunity to enter. I will be putting the entry details down below. For today's entry, all I want you to do is simply comment down below your best tip to remain consistent, because I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are on it. If you do that, you'll be entered into the giveaway, and I will be announcing the winners on Sunday. All those will also go into the end of month prize draw, which is to win 2 months of free coaching. So good luck, guys. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you tomorrow.